That is no small feat. Our only path forward is one that we take together. You being here shows me that you care about the loss of any life and that you understand that our liberation and oppression as people is tied up in one another's. None of us are free until all of us are free. I did not think that my body could hold as much grief, as much rage, despair, sadness, betrayal, or heartbreak than I have in the last 36 days. When the October 7th attacks happened, I rushed to my group chats and called my family to see if they knew what was going on. Over the next few days, I watched in horror as the most brutal siege on Gaza in history had begun, and it is still not over. As of 3 days ago, 25,000 tons of explosives have rained in Gaza, a 25-mile-long strip, equivalent to 2 nuclear bombs. It took me a few days to realize the degree to which this became worldwide news. I remember being in shock when I opened my social media to see that celebrities on every side were talking about this. I was surprised because I, like so many other Arabs in diaspora, am no stranger to witnessing indiscriminate brutality against the Palestinian people, and no stranger to witnessing the strategic silencing by Western powers trying to hide or justify it. To be Arab American, to be Arab in diaspora or in exile, is to be intimately and often painfully aware of every bullet, every bomb, every embargo, every settlement, every occupier, every restriction on food, on water, on fuel, every act of surveillance, every violence, big and small, to our people and to our homelands. I was shocked that finally, after 75 years of colonization, occupation, ethnic cleansing, forced displacement, mass killings and bombings in Palestine, that it was finally garnering public attention. We have witnessed 2 Nakbas in Palestinian history. Nakba it means catastrophe in Arabic. It was the term coined by Palestinians to talk about the mass displacement and settlements in 1948 and 1967, as Carol had outlined. I was even more shocked when I began uncovering what narrative was being pumped out of Western media outlets, that Biden was claiming that Gazans were lying about the death counts, that anyone who was saying anything critical about Israel was suddenly considered an anti-Semite, and shut down any kind of conversation around it, both from Israeli, Western, and US media outlets, just blatant lies and misinformation, talking about Hamas having beheaded 40 babies, which was debunked days later, but the damage had already been done. I couldn't believe my eyes that I was about to experience another war on terror within my lifetime. In the early 2000s, we witnessed over 200,000 innocent Iraqis be mercilessly slaughtered by US forces in the name of eradicating terrorists. It wasn't until 20 years later that the CIA revealed the justifications they had for the war were falsified, and it became apparent that the motives behind this war were oil and other profits gained by destabilizing one of the most prosperous countries in the Middle East. That was not the beginning, and it definitely was not the end to US interference and destabilization in the Middle East. I first visited my family in Jordan in 2007 when I was 12 years old. I spent the entire summer baking in the heat, seeking shade under dozens of fruit trees in the grove at my great-grandfather's house. My dad would sit next to me, cracking open apricot pits with a stone, revealing sweet, velvety nuts in the center. I exclaimed, "I didn't know that you could eat the inside of these pits." He said, "They're different in America. They're bitter and they're toxic." And I thought to myself, that's fitting. I met so many family members that I didn't know existed that summer, my dad's brothers and sister, my grandparents' siblings, and what seemed like an endless stream of relatives that we would just refer to as cousins or aunties. We bounced from house to house, visiting people who would offer us feasts and fruits and candies, hugging my dad like they hadn't seen him in a decade, and hugging me just the same. That summer, we drove around and visited holy sites in Syria and Lebanon. We crossed the Red Sea and visited a beach town in Egypt, and we floated in the Dead Sea that separates Jordan from Palestine and occupied Palestine. It's the lowest point on earth. I fell deeply in love with life there. It felt like home, and I began to understand the longing of my community to return. The next time I visited was in 2015 when I was 20 years old, following the aftermath of the war in Syria. When we got off the plane, I thought I had remembered it all wrong. Driving home from the airport to my uncle's house, nothing felt the same. Every street was congested. The drive from the airport that used to be 20 minutes was now an hour plus. So many people were walking up and down the road selling trinkets or panhandling. We got into Pace, the small rural village that my family hails from, the only Christian town in the country, and it was just as overcrowded. I had never seen so many people in this tiny corner of the earth. Inflation was high. A box of cereal was 6 dinars when it used to be 2. Clothes were expensive. Supermarkets were expensive. And my cousins were all having a hard time making ends meet with so much more competition for labor. I had watched the Syrian civil war unfold in 2011 from afar, and I knew that Jordan, their neighbor to the south, had taken in a lot of displaced people and refugees, but I had no idea the extent. The following summer in 2016, I won an award to do an independent research project for my university. I chose to go back to Jordan and do qualitative interviews on what happened. I got a pool of participants from every walk of life across Jordan, north to south, which is about 60% of Illinois, comparatively. And I asked, how did the refugee crisis impact your daily life? And was consistently met with, which one? That summer illustrated for me the legacy of Western imperialism in the Middle East, how many countries broke into war following destabilization efforts, and how many people were internally displaced. I miss the way the air smells. I miss the fruit stands along the side of the road. I miss the language and the music, the food, and my family. When I see daily destruction of Gaza, watch videos from the remaining journalists on the ground of charred bodies, parents holding their dead children to the skies, hoping for someone to listen. The people who have survived the bombings just to be on the brink of dying by starvation and dehydration because Israel has cut them off from the world. I cannot help but see myself and my family in them. They look like my family. They talk like my family. They eat the same food as my family, and it so easily could have been my family. Had my great-grandfather made even slightly different choices, that could have been me, and in so many ways it is. My heart breaks with every life lost to the occupation. I know that I have the opinion that I do today because of where I come from and who my family is, but if there's one thing I know about this congregation, it's that Holy Trinity. The members of Holy Trinity show up here because of what we stand for. Anti-racism, anti-oppression, and acceptance of all regardless of creed or color. We cannot talk about anti-racism work without talking about the vilification of Arabs and Muslims, or without talking about how white supremacy plays into colonization. As Ryan cited, Israel began as a colonial project, and its existence today is predicated on the decimation of Palestinian spirit and eventually their lives. These concepts are inextricably linked. If you have ever reflected on the greatest atrocities in the history of humankind, the genocide and colonization of the indigenous Americans, South African apartheid, transatlantic slavery, the Holocaust, the Vietnam War, and thought to yourself, I would have done something. I would have stood up for what is right. I wouldn't have let them fool me. I wouldn't have fallen to this propaganda. I wouldn't have followed everyone as they were walking off the cliff. I urge you to find your place in this movement to end the siege in Gaza. We are actively witnessing the genocide of the Palestinians and total destruction of Gaza. Israel claims that they're just trying to retaliate against Hamas, but they have a 95% civilian kill rate. The average of the over 10,000 Palestinians who have been killed to date is, the average age is 5 years old. They claim that Hamas is hiding under the hospitals, so they bomb every hospital in sight. They give 24-hour notice for 1.1 million people to flee from northern Gaza to southern Gaza, or they will be killed. And then they bomb the roads while civilians try to make their way to safety while holding white flags above them. They're targeting journalists and their families, hospitals, schools, and homes. They are marching people while taunting them with rifles in hand. And soldiers are posting pictures to Instagram with Israeli flags in the sand, bragging about how they have reconquered Gaza. Settlers who were born in New York, New Jersey, California, and all across Europe, who came to Israel in the 60s and beyond, are excited to get their beach town back and are already talking to city planners. As we speak, Israel is bulldozing the rubble of the destruction of Gaza to make room for a new settlement. When asked if the Palestinians will return to Gaza, Israeli officials referred to it as the Nakba of 2023. It didn't start with Gaza, and it will not end with Gaza. As we speak, Israelis in the occupied West Bank are being handed AK-47s from their government to protect their land and are assaulting and killing Palestinians with total impunity. It does not end in Palestine or the occupied territories either. In the first 2 weeks of the siege, a 6-year-old boy in Plainfield, Illinois, was stabbed to death by their landlord, a 70-year-old man who was screaming, "You Muslims must die," during the attack. This was days after Netanyahu's media advisor tweeted that the Palestinians were human animals and children of darkness. I grew up terrified of what may happen to my family, sitting at a restaurant with them and their volume gets a little too high and they're speaking Arabic and we're clearly brown in the middle of Ohio. That fear never left and it has only increased tenfold. I'm terrified that they'll be caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, speaking Arabic in public or looking too brown to pass as ethnically ambiguous. As a child, I feared every day when my dad would come home late when he was working plumbing calls in rural Ohio because I feared he would be killed in a hate crime. And they wouldn't know that he watches football every Sunday like any American dad. And they wouldn't know that his favorite song was by the Fugees or that his life was just as precious as theirs. They would only see this brown Arab man as a threat, as a terrorist, as a child of darkness, because their government told them so and the media backed it up. You may feel like you have no power or no say about what happens in Gaza, that it's a million miles away and the politics of it are too complicated to understand. But my hope is that you leave here today with the seedlings of recognition that we are all responsible for each other. And that by not taking a stand to urge for an immediate ceasefire, to end the genocide and end the occupation, we are compromising our humanity. The US gives $3.8 billion of aid to Israel every year, with nearly 153 million of it coming from Illinois. These are American-made and funded bombs that are tearing apart homes and hospitals and schools and killing over tens of thousands of Palestinians. Our tax dollars are directly and materially contributing to this destruction. You may feel hopeless, like you don't know where to start, or that you need more information to feel resolute in taking action. But I'm here to tell you that the path to hope and resolution is action. Chicago is home to the largest Palestinian population in the United States. There are actions and mobilizations happening every day, and even if you aren't protesting in the streets, you can call your representatives to demand an immediate ceasefire. Though I am heartbroken beyond belief, though I feel betrayed by this world and begin to lose faith in humanity, I'm filled with hope for the generations to come. We have seen the horrors of war unfold in our histories, and people are filling the streets saying never again and not in my name. Millions of people around the world are mobilizing for Palestine, and it brings me to tears. I am reminded of a quote from Arundhati Roy. Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet night, I can hear her breathing. I pray for a quiet night in Gaza. I believe another world is on her way, and I hope that you will join me in welcoming her.